Good day, everyone. This video lecture is the continuation of my previous lecture about the competing perspectives of globalization. Days ago, I uploaded my discussion about hyperglobalism. The link of that video is provided in the description below. Thus, for today, we will move on to the other view of globalization, which is skepticism. Now, what is skepticism? If you can still recall, hyperglobalists contend that in globalization, states are irrelevant. However, skepticism is a perspective in international relations that dismisses the contention that contemporary globalization makes the state irrelevant. As we go over our discussion, we will understand why skeptics disagree with the hyperglobalist view. Now, let's proceed to the thesis of skepticism. The thesis of skepticism is that globalization is an ongoing form of internationalization, meaning globalization is not a recent or distinct development. Instead, skeptics argue that it represents a continuation or evolution of historical processes of internationalization that have been occurring for centuries. And in the process of internationalization, national governments are essential to the regulation of international economic activity. And the continuing liberalization of the economy can only be made possible by the power of the national governments. Now, what is the impact of globalization to the national government? Skeptics asseverate that national governments are not irrelevant. In fact, their roles are strengthened. In the paper entitled Three Different Perspectives on the Role of the Nation State in Today's Globalized World, written by Usgur Solakuglu, he cited the views of some skeptics that today the nation states are still one of the major players of globalization and that the organs of the United Nations are merely instruments of powerful nations and are designed to achieve their political aims. Skeptics argued that the world is still state-centric. However, today, states are more powerful than ever, particularly in relation to their capacity for effective management of domestic and international economic activities. As contended by Kenneth Waltz, international politics remains international. Global or world politics has not taken over from national politics. The 20th century was the century of the nation state. The 21st will be too. To proceed, what are the driving forces of globalization? According to the skeptics, it is the states that shape globalization, and it is their national interest that drives it. In the book entitled The Globalization Paradox, Democracy and the Future of the World Economy by Danny Roderick, Roderick argues that globalization is shaped by the choices made by individual states. He contends that states have the power to determine the extent and nature of their engagement with the global economy, and they do so based on their own interests, political constraints, and domestic priorities. This source, among others, provide insights into the skeptical view that states shape globalization based on their national interest. Again, skeptics argue that states have agency and the ability to influence the pace, the direction, and the outcomes of global integration. While globalization involves various non-state actors and transnational forces, skeptics emphasize that states remain key actors in determining the rules, regulations, and policies that govern global economic, political, and cultural interactions. Finally, what best describes the contemporary world? The skeptics opine that the terms internationalization or regionalization have much higher descriptive value and provide a much better conceptualization of contemporary affairs. To note, the world, according to them, is fragmented into regional financial and trade blocs dominated by North America, Europe, and East Asia. In relation to this regionalization or fragmentation, the world is on the verge of having clashes of civilization or chaos, notwithstanding that this exclusive grouping not only limits the participation of other regions but results into political, economic, or cultural gaps which can potentially cause conflict. Now, that concept is opposite to the radical views of hyperglobalists that the contemporary order, the homogenization, marks the end of history. In conclusion, skeptics argue that one, the driving force of globalization are the states and their national interests. Two, the role of national government is strengthened contrary to the hyperglobalist view that the state is irrelevant. And three, the contemporary order is best described not as a globalized world but more on regional or fragmented world. In fact, based on statistical evidence, the world was more integrated in the 19th century than today with respect to the levels of trade, labor, and investment flows. So thank you for listening and keep posted for the last video lecture regarding the competing views of globalization.